You're listening to 88.9 WNYO's special presentation of the SUNY Oswego Political Science Club's debate between the College Democrats, the College Republicans, the International Socialist Organization, and the Young Americans for Freedom. This is a pre-recorded debate that took place on November 19th, 2019. Moderating the debate is Erica Solomon and Harrison Mark from the SUNY Oswego Political Science Club. Let's introduce tonight's participants. Representing the College Democrats is Alex Ehrenberg. Representing the College Republicans is Wyatt Fulton. Representing the International Socialist Organization is Max Moses. And representing the Young Americans for Freedom is Tyler Toomey. We wish tonight's participants from both sides of the political aisle good luck and happy debating. We go now to Erica Solomon and Harrison Mark for their opening remarks.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Erica. I'm president of Political Science Club.
I'm Harrison, and I'm secretary of Political Science Club.
So we're so excited to be doing this event again this year. We're going to try and start doing it every semester, so look forward to that next semester. But just a little bit about Political Science Club. We meet every other Tuesday in Mahar 467 at 7:30 if you're interested in coming to our meetings, and we talk about politics and putting on this event and stuff like that. So, yeah. Yeah,
it's really fun. So just to go over the, before we begin, I'd like to have everybody sitting up here, all our lovely participants, to introduce themselves. Please state your name, what club you're on behalf of, and the purpose of your club on campus.
All right. Well, I'm Max. I am the vice president of the International Socialist Organization here on campus, and we're here to talk about socialism.
Hi guys, I'm Alex. I'm the president of the College Democrats. And
talk a little louder.
Okay. I'm Alex. I'm the president of the College Dems on campus, and our purpose is to help support Democratic candidates, local and federal.
My name is Wyatt Fulton. I am the vice president of the College Republicans, and our purpose on campus is to support Republican candidates, local and federal, and we want to have fun, yes, have fun on campus.
Tyler Toomey, president of Young Americans for Freedom. Our goal is to spread conservative values on campus, off campus, and provide opportunities for our members to learn and grow within the conservative movement.
All right, awesome. Thank you, guys. Before we begin, I'm just going to explain how we're going to do things to you and for the audience. So we're going to ask you a question. I think we'll start down here, and then for each question, we'll move along with who starts. Each of you will have 2 minutes speaking time, and then if anyone feels the need to reply to anyone else, we'll give you a minute, and then we'll keep going with a minute until things have gone on for too long. As for you, audience, the last 30 minutes we're going to give to you to ask some questions. I don't feel like I need to say it, but I just want to make sure that you know that as the title suggests, we're trying to get along here. So no matter how much you may disagree with things someone has said, I ask that you be respectful in your questions. But other than that, feel free to ask away.
Yeah, and also while they're talking, while we're asking them questions, try and keep your noise level to a minimum, just so we can get through all the questions. And it's an enjoyable experience for all of us.
All right, so let's get started.
Ooh. All right, so to get started with a question that is not about politics and is just to get you in the mood to talk, what is the best place to eat off campus?
Is this going to me?
Yep.
So personally, I love Maria's. It's a really great little diner kind of place. I always get the cinnamon roll pancakes with some fries. It's possibly the best meal I've ever had.
There's a place I think it's on Utica Street. It's called Canale's. It's an Italian restaurant. They have amazing sauce. I went there with my mom last year, I think, for Easter, and she loved the sauce so much, she bought 3 cans of it and brought it home. So I've just been having Canale sauce at home.
The breakfast at Wade's slaps. I'm not gonna lie. Everything at Wade's is so good, you can't go wrong. I mean, I wish it was open longer. But I haven't been there in a while, so I had to make a run out there. The last time I was there, I had breakfast with my friends Jay and Kevin, and then we went out for the day on an adventure. So it was a really, really great experience, and Wade's is awesome.
I'm going to go with Woodchucks. They're on the east side, I think East 9th maybe. They have great chicken wings, best in the city, I think.
All right, yeah. Thank you for those points of view. Yeah, I know some of those things are controversial.
So everyone relax.
All right, yeah. All right, on to the actual questions. So, all right, we're going to hit you with a bit of a harder one. What are your solutions to solving climate change?
Well, I've taken a look at the Green New Deal. I think it's a really good plan. I think it has feasible solutions for making sure that we're reducing our carbon emissions. And I know some people might like to try to push the focus on other countries like China and India. But per capita emissions, China, while it ranks number 1 in total emissions, actually drops down to, I believe, 12th, while the United States only drops from 2nd to 3rd. So we really do also need to work on making sure that our emissions are going down too. We need to be focusing on investing in green energy solutions like solar, wind, other sources, hydroelectric as well. So I think those are some really good places to look at solutions.
Yep.
Honestly, I'd say I relatively agree with Alex. I mean, there has to be all of us have to come to an agreement on what to do. We can't make it one side or the other because honestly, one thing I have to say is that the Earth isn't going to be destroyed in 12 years because, what?
I said I do.
No, well, the Earth isn't going to be destroyed in 12 years, but there are things that we can do to make sure it lasts longer than 12 years. I mean, 13 years would still be great, but that's all I really have to say. Alex really hit the nail on the head.
I think the solution to the climate challenges is investing in nuclear. Nuclear is a clean energy. It's one of the most efficient clean energies we have. It's cost effective. It works very well. And in order to invest in that, I think we can benefit from a carbon tax. So anything that you buy or use that produces carbon, you or the manufacturer, seller, it all depends on who the tax falls on. But it's somewhere along the line, there would be a tax put on the production emissions of that carbon. And then instead of putting that tax into the government's bank to spend on whatever they want, I would like to see that tax go directly into investing in nuclear power. And then eventually the tax will eliminate itself because we'd have such great investments in nuclear that it would be so cost efficient and cost effective that it would be silly to use carbon because it would just cost you so much money and it wouldn't be worth your while anymore.
All right. Well, just really quick problem with the nuclear problem. So we really we have a storage method, but it is not currently being used. It's the Yucca Mountain. It's in Nevada. It was a salt mine. It was designed specifically to house large amounts of nuclear waste. Currently, though, we do not have an effective means of storing these rods. The barrels that they're kept in last about 10 years, and they've been around for about 30, 40. So they're leaking. They're entire communities that have been completely destroyed because of these issues like cancer causing things and general loss of ability to live properly. But I do believe in the Green New Deal. I think it's a pretty good idea. I would also like to hold the big polluters accountable. So Unilever, Coca-Cola, all of the top 100 companies really put all of that on us. So the advertisements with the crying Native American man from the 80s where there's a broken bottle at his feet. Well, that was created by Coca-Cola and a bunch of other companies, and the point of it was to blame individual people for their polluting because they switched from glass bottles to plastic bottles that were disposable. And those glass bottles, it was more expensive to clean them than it was to just make new bottles. So they just kind of put it on everybody else, and I think they should be held accountable.
Right, that's a nice segue into our next question, which you sort of already answered, but no, it's okay. Should we start by attacking individual plastic use or by tackling corporate pollution, and why?
Well, I feel like I got my answer.
Yeah, you you kind of already answered it, but
Yeah, we'll start with the college Republicans.
I would say generally if you go after the larger corporations, you can put more of a dent into the greater issue than someone who individually just throws away plastic bottles. Because if you talk at the corporate level, they're going to do more damage than the individual because they have more money and more facilities that pump carbon into the air. And what's your name?
Max.
Max also hit the nail on the head with that one. I never thought I'd say this, but I agree with Max.
Thank you.
There you go.
All right, thank you.
Sure. I think if we're talking about going after, people, individuals using some of these plastics or corporations, talking about the government going after that, I think neither is the answer. I think government regulating and going after people or corporations for things is wrong, and it should be from a free market perspective. As we've seen, several companies have already adapted, whether it's paper or less plastic, like Starbucks with their cups and things like that. That it really comes from pressure from where individuals are headed and what they're asking for, and the companies that can adapt and respond to that the best are going to ultimately succeed in the marketplace. If a company is putting out tons of plastic and individuals aren't buying that product because of that, that company needs to adapt and do better. So they need to change, or they're going to go out of business because people are moving towards something else. So it starts with the individuals putting pressure on the corporations for what the individuals want to see happen.
I think it's I think it should start with the individuals, but I definitely think the government should get involved to hold people accountable for things. So creating laws like child labor laws were not initially popular because it made people a lot of money. These companies were able to outcompete one another because they had no cost to basically run them. And I don't think the market is the only way to show the right way, or at least even be ethically okay or moral.
yeah.
I have to agree with Max here. I don't think that individual pressure alone is enough to cause companies to switch their method completely. I mean, look right in front of us. We have plastic bottle right here. It's not going to alone solve the solution or solve the problem. We do need some government intervention to help us switch away from these plastics that are polluting our oceans.
All right, thank you. Before we move on, would anyone like to reply? Nope. All right, cool. So one final climate question. Do you believe that we should pull out of the Paris Climate Accord? Why or why not? We'll start with Tyler for this one.
To be very honest with you, I don't know all the particulars on that, so I have no real opinion. I think we should be involved in working with other countries to, make climate changes and do better, but I don't know enough about it to have a strong opinion on that specifically.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Well, I think that it's kind of silly to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord because it has literal no accountability. It is just a goal that people wanted to work towards. So we set these goals and we kind of chastise ourselves. But other than that, it was just a way to get people or different countries to work together in order to try to get a little bit greener, or at least not as much pollutants.
I agree. I agree with Max. I think when we pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, we joined 2 other countries. I think it might have been a couple. I know the list was very short of countries that did not sign on to the Paris Climate Agreement. So we joined that very small list, and like you said, it was just goals. We were just trying to set goals for ourselves to reach. I don't really think it was a smart move to pull out of that agreement.
I really don't know enough about the Paris Climate Agreement to come to a conclusion, but from what I've been hearing from Max and Alex, if it was just goals, then what was the point of just staying in it if you're not doing action? If you're not having any actions, then what was the point of staying in it to begin with? So if we did pull out of it, then what was the point of going in there in the first place? And why is it such a big deal if we leave?
Right over quiet.
So like the whole point of it was that it was, I think, like one of the first agreements that we got both China and India to sign on to say that they would try to work towards these goals of limiting their pollution. Because the top 3 polluters in the world in order, I think, is China, United States, India. So we were trying to get them to cut their emissions as well, which hadn't really worked in the past. So I think it was one of the first times when we got measured we could do something like this.
Has it been working now?
Yeah, actually, China's been doing a lot in this regard.
Like I said earlier, they cut in per capita emissions. They dropped from first overall to 12th. So and India goes from 3rd to 20th. I think. So it does do real work.
All right, thank you.
All right, so kind of bringing it from a whole worldly perspective back down to our campus and on a different issue altogether. Should we have free speech zones on our campus, or do you believe that our entire campus should be a free speech area, and why?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I think free speech zones should exist. Free speech on campus everywhere. I don't think people quite understand like how free speech totally works. Like you can't yell fire in a crowd, like in a closed building. Like that is not free speech. I can't go into somebody's classroom and just scream the whole time to make sure that they don't get to teach their lesson. I believe that there should be specific areas where people can actually have these kinds of discussions and actually have like useful feedback and responses, and that are non-disruptive to class.
Yeah, I agree. College campuses are definitely supposed to be a place where people can openly discuss their ideas and their opinions on those ideas. For sure, I agree with that.
I think our entire campus should be a free speech area, partially because, agreeing with Alex's points, college is supposed to change people and you're supposed to discuss different ideas. But why would you have designated zones where you can discuss set ideas, or it's almost like chess boxing in a sense, where you have you just have a ring where you can discuss free speech ideas. And I wouldn't go to a free speech area like the quad, for example, and just shout fire, because I wouldn't do anything as well. And even if you disagree with people, you can't. I wouldn't want to discuss it in a specific area. I just want to go up to you on any part of campus if I have a problem with what you're saying, and have the ability to rationally discuss it instead of yelling at other people.
So free speech does come down to time, place, and manner. So there is some restrictions on it, like fire in a building, things like that. But I think as a public university, our campus should be a free speech, a place where we can have free speech, as long as we're not disrupting academic classrooms, events that are already planned and ongoing. Like if someone came in here, yelling and screaming and disrupting the event, that's not okay. But, if someone is outside, in front of Shinneman and in between the buildings here, why can't they have free speech? Why should they have to go all the way to the other side of campus just to have their free speech, like we saw with the preacher a few weeks ago on campus? I think free speech on campus should apply to students and members of the general public. I don't think you should need to have a permit and a 3-day waiting period for free speech. That's not really free speech. That's, can I please speak? So I think, as long as you're not disrupting academics or pre-organized planned events, you should be able to speak wherever you'd like on campus without having any restrictions placed on you for that.
All right. Yes.
About that permit thing, I think what the school was mostly worried about was that they didn't know that he was coming, and they didn't have the time to adequately prepare.
They shouldn't need to know or prepare.
Well, because we all saw what was going on with what he was speaking about, and we did see that there were some issues with concerns for safety. So that would have probably been nice for the campus to have a heads up so they knew what was going to happen, so that if there was a need to worry about safety, they could adequately respond to it in time. all I was thinking about that.
Sure, I understand it'd be nice to have a heads up, and it'd be nice to, be able to plan for that and things like that. But at the same time, if something, major political event were to happen, right now, and students wanted to get out and express their views on it, should they have to wait 3 days to do that? I don't think so.
All right. If that's everything on that, we're going to move on. Our next question is, do you think that social media debate is constructive? I forget who went first last time. Okay.
I think social media debate can be constructive. I think that it can also be deconstructive. I think it can be both at the same time. If you look in the comments section on Twitter, it can get pretty rough. But you just have to make sure that you're I guess, talking to people who want to also have a constructive debate. If you're talking to people who just want to express their views and not hear what you have to say, well, that's not going to be a constructive debate. You have to make sure that you're, I guess, just talking to the people who want to hear what you have to say too.
To Alex's point, social media is a double-edged sword. Everybody has a platform to say what they feel, but they also have the same token to de-platform you for how you feel. Nope, and I think Twitter is a good example of a bit of an echo chamber of what the overarching theme of political unrest is, because you have people who say how they feel and they won't want to see how the other side feels. They only surround themselves in what they want to see. And that's not good, because if you have only one side of the same coin, you're not going to have the ability to rationalize what you feel, and how someone else feels will be completely different than how you feel, and you'll keep butting heads, and it'll be a never-ending cycle, and nobody will get anywhere.
I think you can debate on social media. If someone says something and you can go back and forth in a constructive manner, great. I think far too often it turns into people, angrily typing away and yelling, screaming, or just, kind of passing things off. So I think it all depends on who the people engaged in it are. But, you can have great conversations and debates with people, or you can, have one-sided things and just kind of getting more angry with each other. So it really depends on who's involved.
I agree. It does definitely depend on who's involved. I'm going to say, the vast majority of the time, these people are usually going to be fighting and not taking each other's mind. But it can be constructive in that you are essentially, like we are doing right now, in all debates, you are playing for people on the fence who are not quite decided. Usually people are kind of hard set in their beliefs once they have them. Once we're up here, I feel like we all have a pretty good idea of what we believe in, but for everybody else who is not 100% sure, we're trying to advertise to you, and I think that's what every debate is about. But specifically with social media, I think it's interesting. So with social media, you can completely drown somebody out with misinformation or false narratives and whatnot. We're probably going to talk about that later, aren't we?
That's all right.
All right. So, you can increasingly divide people by creating increasingly polarized Facebook groups. For example, Macedonia was known to do this, specifically funded from Russia. About 200 people in a small town in Macedonia made a bunch of Facebook pages that were increasingly polarizing, trying to get people to view them so they can get some money, but also to kind of divide the American public a little bit more. And that I don't think is incredibly constructive, especially when the things are usually false.
All right, great.
All right, so now we're going to move on to a totally different topic. So how do you think the impeachment inquiry of Donald Trump has, or will affect our nation?
I don't know. It's a moment in history for sure. No matter how you feel about a political arrangement, the inquiries into the impeachment proceedings of Donald Trump will impact you one way or another. I tend to lean on the side that they are grabbing for straws. They haven't come up with anything besides bribery that actually carries weight. Now, the first time they threw in bribery, that has something that carries weight. With other things that they're reaching for, they're honestly just throwing darts at a board and seeing what sticks. And now that they have physical proof of bribery, that's what they'll go forward with.
Tyler?
Yeah, I think it's it's definitely a historic a moment. It's only happened a handful of times in the country's history. This is one. Like Wyatt said, they're really reaching. I really don't think there's any crimes committed by this president at all. I don't think there's any time where he tried to commit a crime or anything like that. And I think what we're seeing is this one-party controlled House of Representatives controlling everything right now. And really they're just putting what they want out there. And they thought it was going to be a home run hit with all these public hearings now. And it's not really boding too well for them. A lot of holes are coming up in some of their narratives and their storylines. They aren't really working out too well. And I see this as only boosting the president's re-election efforts next year. And to go off that, if you don't like the president, get out, vote for somebody else, volunteer for somebody else, donate to somebody else. I see this as a way of Democrats trying to get the president out of office because they know they can't beat him in an election. And it really just comes down to that.
All right.
All right. Well, I do unfortunately agree that it probably does bode well for his fan base because I don't think he can change the minds of people that well. But I think that he believes in unitary executive power, meaning that the president, by definition, is completely unculpable for any wrongdoing, which is something that is absolutely ludicrous to me. I don't understand how you could not hold a man accountable for doing illegal things. So, intentionally and admitting to it on Twitter and other platforms that he intentionally tried to manipulate a foreign government into investigating a political opponent's family member. That is ludicrous. The Watergate, there's so many things that he's done that have been illegal. He owns property, or at least his family owns property that gets benefits for him in other countries. That, by definition, is already illegal for the president to do. There's so many reasons why I believe that this president has committed crimes, and I think he should be held accountable.
All right, Alex?
I gotta agree with Max on this. If you're giving aid to a country and you say, okay, we'll give you this aid, but you gotta do us a favor first. You gotta investigate my political opponent's son for his involvement in an oil company. That is a crime within itself, and it needs to be investigated. Since he's the president of the United States, it's an impeachable offense. And to your point that this is Democrats trying to just get Trump out of office, we know who's in the number 2 spot. We know Mike Pence would become president if Donald Trump got removed from office, and we're not very thrilled about that, but we need to hold this president accountable. He committed a crime, and we need to move forward with impeachment.
He even lied under oath, and repeatedly, all the time. And we already got rid of a president because of that. I just wanted to throw that in there, but oh my god.
Would anyone else like to reply?
What about innocent until proven guilty? Whatever happened to that?
I mean, he's been proven to have lied under oath. That's already, we got that.
But is that an impeachable offense?
Yes. Yeah. That's for that reason, yes.
That's perjury. Yeah. That's why I got impeached.
If the Democrats were so solid about that, why would they run with that in the first place?
I mean, this one's got they could take your pick out of a hat essentially, but I don't know. They just chose this one. This one's probably one of the more egregious ones.
Wouldn't they want to choose something more solid ground so they can actually get what they want?
I mean, this is pretty significant. Yeah, pretty solid, I'd say.
All right, is that it? All right. So our next question, we're going to move on to everybody's favorite topic, which is gun control. So I'd just like to ask, what are your opinions on gun control reform? what should we be doing, if anything? I think it was,
I went last and last.
okay, it's Tyler's.
The best form of gun control is using 2 hands, not 1. That's safer. But in all seriousness, the gun control issue is something that doesn't need to be looked at a little bit. But the best way to stop a bad person with a gun is a good person with a gun. It's been proven time and time again. I don't know if it was this week or the past week, there was a shooter that was stopped in a Walmart by a armed civilian. And, with law enforcement response times, they're quick, but they are not as quick as somebody that is armed being in that spot. And then the question comes back to, is that person trained well enough? To get your license to carry in New York State, you have to go through a training process. And other states, have similar processes to do that. And if you are a person that carries firearms, usually you're someone that cares about that and you proactively take your own steps to further train yourself. So I would take my chances with that over, nobody having a firearm around to prevent those tragedies from happening. And the second comes back to, the original purpose of the Second Amendment is to stop from a tyrannical government. And, we're seeing government take more and more power every step of the way that they can. And, we're not at a point now where you would need, to use guns against the government by any stretch of the means, but that's the original purpose, and that right needs to be protected for that purpose as well as personal protection.
All right, thank you.
All right. Well, I do absolutely believe in the right to bear arms. I think that I'm going to base it off the Swiss model, where everyone is allowed to own a gun, but they have to keep it on a gun range, which would work similar to an armory for the right to bear arms, which was the original intention. But yeah, they have to go through rigorous training. They have to go through a bunch of background checks. But you are allowed to own and use a weapon. You just need to keep it there. And I think that a good person with a gun model is not the best idea. There are tons of examples of children finding weapons in houses and shooting somebody. Wasn't there one to prevent school shootings? I'm not 100% sure on this one, but I'm pretty sure there was a teacher that they just started harming people in the school, and then some kid actually got hit by a stray bullet or something. Yeah, I think it might have been Georgia. So I don't think that is a necessarily effective means to stopping shootings. In Australia, a bunch of politicians essentially sacrificed their careers to try to ban, or at least significantly hinder gun use in their country with buybacks and a bunch of other processes. And they have not had a mass shooting since 1994, I think it was. But prior to that, they had a couple.
Couple things. First of all, let's discuss the fact that it is illegal for the CDC to do research on gun violence under the Dickey Amendment because the NRA lobbied in the 90s. I think it was 96 it was first added to the budget. The NRA lobbied in the 90s so that the CDC could not publish reports that supported gun control measures. And so it's illegal for the CDC to do research on the topic. However, the FBI has released a couple of studies on mass shootings. There was one in 2013. They studied, I think, 136 mass shootings. 5 of them were stopped by a so-called good guy with a gun. 20 of them were stopped by a good guy without a gun. So actually, 4 times more likely to stop a mass shooting if you don't have a gun than if you do have a gun. And even so, those numbers are so small out of the whole set that it really does not have an effect. There are some common sense measures that could have an effect, though. You could have enforceable universal background checks, for example. That would be a good start. Reinforcing the assault weapons ban would also be a very good start. There are tons of measures out there that would do a very good job of actually cutting down the number of these tragedies that are just unable to be even looked at because of this Dickey Amendment. We obviously have to repeal the Dickey Amendment so we can actually take a look at the studies that prove that gun control works.
Thank you.
Actually, I don't know if I can ask a question.
Sure.
How many of you in here have tried to buy a firearm? I have as well. The background process is very difficult to buy a firearm in the state of New York. The background checks in the state of New York are some of the almost the best in the country, and the gun laws in the state of New York are some of the strictest in the country. In places where strict gun control has been implemented, the crime rate has gone up staggeringly. Look at Chicago, for example. The crime rate in Chicago is through the roof, especially gun crimes.
I'll reply to that real quick. With Chicago specifically, it's still very easy for people to get guns, even though there are considerable gun control measures. Chicago is right next to Indiana, so if someone wants a gun, they'll just go to Indiana, buy the gun, and come back in. So, I mean, it's still very easy to get a gun into Chicago because of that. A couple other things real quick I forgot to mention. In Switzerland, I also believe there's some form of compulsory military service, so everyone knows how to use a gun. I think, yeah, you said it's 2 years, so everyone knows how to use a gun. So there's that as well.
All right. Sort of staying on the same topic. A lot of people, when they talk about gun control, will also talk about mental health reform. So do you think that we should be tackling gun control reform or mental health reform, or both at the same time, and why? Yeah, sure.
I mean, I feel like mental health reform, those two things, I mean, gun control is important, but I think mental health is like a really, really big deal for like the whole country all the time. You cannot throw a rock on a college campus without hitting somebody with depression, essentially. You laugh, but it's pretty true. I think that mental health needs to be talked about more. It needs way more funding. There needs to be way more initiatives dealing with mental health than we currently have. When it comes to mental health and gun control, absolutely, yeah, you got to check in on people's mental well-being before they buy a weapon that can kill people.
I gotta agree with that. Also, the number one cause of death due to guns is actually suicide. Suicide is the number one cause of gun-related deaths. So obviously, mental health needs to be a part of the discussion. We need to make sure that people are okay mentally before they buy a gun. For sure.
I'd have to agree with both of you. I think we greatly need to update our mental health research, because people's mental health will impact, especially when committing suicide, because if they have mental deterioration, they will want to commit suicide more. I mean, honestly, you don't even have, people who want to commit suicide, there's no point in change, you're not going to change their mind. They're inherently going to do it. They have the desire to do so. They won't do it. If they can't do it with a gun, they'll just do it with anything else. Do it with a knife, or they'll do it with a toaster in a bathtub. They'll find a way to do it.
I'm going to jump in real quick there. The reason why guns in particular are a major problem with suicide is that it's so quick.
It's the easiest method, yes.
Yeah, you don't have to think about it. You just I'm feeling really, really upset right now and I really want to die. All right, I've got this gun right here. It's going to be over in 1 second. All right. Whereas for a more drawn out process, you have to think about what you're doing more, and that saves lives.
Tyler, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I think it comes back, talking about it in a gun problem, I don't think the two are, directly related. I think mental health, kind of feeds into some of the problems like the suicide issue you mentioned. But I think to really tackle the problem, it needs to be tackled in schools first. Starting down elementary school and all the way up through. I think if we can do a better job of starting in the elementary schools with, awareness and different, tactics to address mental health, that'll create a better culture around it, that these kids grow up more accepting and, knowing the resources available, knowing to help each other, and being better equipped, to handle these issues. But I think putting, resources into starting awareness or starting, using resources, things like that, in the schools is a really good way to kind of and quickly equip our society as a whole to be more understanding and better able to deal with these issues. And then from there we can deal with the challenges of, bringing gun control into that and things like that.
All right, thank you. All right, so moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about healthcare. So what do you think should be done about the healthcare system? And if you think something should be done, what is your suggested healthcare policy and why? I forgot who we start with, I'm sorry. Okay.
So what we had under Obamacare was great, really. We reduced the uninsured rate from 20% to 12% over the course of 6 years, roughly. But it's still not enough. 59% of Americans still say that a $1,000 emergency medical expense would be enough to put them over the edge into financial ruin. So we obviously need something different. What I would propose would be Medicare for All Who Want It plan. So if you want Medicare, you can just go into the program like what most seniors have already available. It would cover all necessary medical expenses like emergency hospital visits, doctor visits, stuff like that, prescription drugs. Another thing that I would do is I would make it so that the Department of Health and Human Services could negotiate for lower drug prices. That's something that the Veterans Health Administration already does on their own. And if someone likes their insurance that they have through their employer, then I would allow them the freedom to keep that insurance. That's something that I think is important. And if someone thinks that there is something extra that Medicare doesn't cover, they can buy a supplemental plan through private insurers. But private insurers would be very strictly regulated to make sure that they aren't taking advantage of consumers unnecessarily, because that is something that has been happening in the healthcare industry. It's been for-profit misery, basically, and that has to stop now.
I generally agree with most of the points that Alex made. The only thing I would do different would be that I wouldn't go in as hard on privatized healthcare, because the quality of privatized healthcare generally dwarfs that of public healthcare. Because if you have access to privatized healthcare, you're more likely to go to people who are better at the services they're providing. If you have healthcare that anybody can readily access, the quality will still be generally good, but it's not going to be as good as if it were privatized. I mean, if you go to Canada, they have a general universal healthcare system. The quality of their program isn't exactly the best. Most rich Canadians will come down to America and they have to go get treatments. So,
I think that there's a fine balance between private healthcare and having some, public funded healthcare for those who do need it. But as someone who has been to the DMV before, I don't like the government running a lot of things. They're very bad at it. So I think having a government-run healthcare system would be extremely inefficient. The VA, they do great work at the VA, but they are extremely inefficient. They have really long wait times, and they're just not a good system. Essentially, having a universal government-run healthcare would look similar to that. They would look to that model to expand it throughout the country. And I think we do need to have some sort of, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, different options for people who do have medical emergencies. They can't afford to take care of those. They don't have their own insurance. They don't have insurance through their work, things like that. We're not going to leave them hanging. But as a whole, I think a private healthcare industry is beneficial for everybody.
All right, thank you. Next.
I mean, I agree entirely with my Democratic counterpart. It's very clear that this is a messed up system. One of the things I just wanted to point out, I don't think people realize just how much profit pharmaceutical companies make off of their products. It is insane the margins they make. They charge so much more than they actually need to continue making these products, that some sort of government intervention is essentially necessary at this point. But other than that, I completely agree.
All right, any other points?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick point. I think you said something about, I forgot what I was going to say. No,
Okay.
happens sometimes.
All right, well, moving on. So, do you think we've done enough regarding LGBTQ plus rights in the world and on our campus? And do you think we should be doing more? And if you do think that we should be doing more, what should we be doing?
seeing as I am not a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I can't really say exactly how they're being treated, but I know through like as compared to third world countries, I think a lot of members of the LGBTQ community have a fair amount of rights because in some third world countries it is actually still, it's illegal to be a member of the LGBTQ community and you will be thrown off of a building. So I really don't feel that some people have, for our rights in America, we don't have it as bad as members in other third world countries. And on our campus specifically, I think that the rights are pretty good from what I have been hearing. Since I'm not exactly a member of their community, I can't really say too much about it.
I think conservatives or Republicans sometimes get a bad rep for their stances on these issues, and some of them deserve that bad rep, and they are against LGBT issues, which is wrong. Really, conservative values are let people live their lives and have the government not really have a say in their lives. And if you want to live your life however you would like, go for it. I think conservatives need to get back to their roots on this issue. And when it comes to, the government of the campus doing more for these communities, I'm not a supporter of that because I just think they shouldn't be doing much for anybody's, any specific one group's issues. Live your life how you want to live it, and I think people as a whole need to be accepting of that, and that we can't, regulate that down, so to speak.
All right. Well, I mean, we live in a country where you can deny people housing based on their identification or their sexuality. But even just there's just so many things, so many disenfranchised things. The fact that people are still sent to re-education camps or straight camps, that is a real thing that still occurs today, and that our vice president believes in. We got a long way to go. I think that is very clear to me. But for the rest of the world, I mean, again, like you mentioned, there are places in the world where it is absolutely illegal to be gay, and that is crazy to me.
I would just say we've made a lot of progress, but there is still a lot of way to go. Homophobia and transphobia are completely real. We have to make sure that we are saying that over and over again, and we're addressing it over and over again. And to your point, Tyler, that people shouldn't, that organizations shouldn't really be doing anything to make sure that we're addressing this. I would have to disagree because, I mean, you take your thumb off the finger a little bit, and we're going to be reverting back to where people who are gay or trans or anything are seen as like lesser than us, the rest of us, and that can't be allowed. So I mean, we saw with the Voting Rights Act, for example. I'm going to just make an analogy here. The Voting Rights Act held a lot of voting rights in protection in the South specifically, and when the Supreme Court gutted that, we saw Southern states gut voting rights, and the same thing will happen with LGBTQ plus rights if we take our thumb off the pedal just a little bit.
All right. All right, so the next question is, do you think it's possible from your perspective to separate someone from their political beliefs, even if those beliefs may dehumanize you or someone you love? Again, I don't know who started. I'm sorry.
I went to
Okay.
Sure, I think it's absolutely possible. I think it's a lot harder for some people. I would imagine for the four of us, we're pretty ingrained in politics. I know I am. It's a daily thing. Whether between on campus, working off campus on different political things, it's part of who I am. But I have several friends who disagree with me or who are not political at all, and we can have conversations. We can do things that have nothing to do with politics. Politics aren't even brought up. So I think it's entirely possible. It's all depends on the person. You know, if somebody thinks I have this horrible, vile, disgusting view of something and they don't want to associate with me, that's fine. I respect their decision to do that, and you know, that's up to them. But if they want to discuss it with me, I'll discuss it with them, and you know, if we can be friends outside of politics, great. If we can't, you know, that's their prerogative to do so.
Thank you.
I can be absolutely friends with people from other political leanings, but when you like don't believe that another person is on like the same level as you, is like dehumanizing somebody else, I can't stand by that. That's ridiculous. Everyone's a person. You should treat them all that way. It is insane to me that some people don't want that. That's all I have to say.
I agree. I'll hang out with conservatives sometimes.
Yeah.
As long as you treat everyone with respect and as a human being, then I'll continue to be your friend. But when you show someone disrespect, that's not really an attractive friendship quality. It shows.
I agree with the points that all my counterparts made. As long as you treat me the same way that you want to be treated, I'll treat you the exact same way. I always tend to put my best foot forward with everybody. I give even people who I meet on the street, I always give them the same respect that I'd give myself. And I want to see everybody not everybody can be happy all at once, but if you can change one person's life, then you've changed a lot.
All right, so moving on to a different issue. I get a little heated here, I don't know. But what are the merits and detriments of capitalism or socialism, depending on the system that you support?
Alright, so, I mean, obviously, I think socialism is a pretty good idea. I think that, like, in their purest forms, I think socialism is a good thing and capitalism is evil, by their very definitions. Like, laissez-faire capitalism is true capitalism, and people were burned in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire because they had no access to leave because they didn't want them to. There were a bunch of child labor problems. Even one of the representatives brought here by the YAF even mentioned specifically the benefits of like social change through socialism, unwittingly, but she did in that like the establishment of the 40-hour work week, the unionizations of things. I think all of these things try to make the world a more fair and better place for everybody rather than being advantageous to a specific person. I do believe, however, that capitalism is a really, really good way to have a lot of growth very quickly, as long as you don't care about the ethics or morals of it. But otherwise, go ahead.
So there's a saying that some of you might have heard of, that we've never seen a true socialist state. We've also never seen a true capitalist state. There's always been some tiny little restriction on the free market that prevents it from being a true capitalist state. I think we need to take that into consideration. We've never really seen either method fully work out. Obviously, they both have their merits. Capitalism does allow for a lot of innovation, and like you said, it allows for a lot of growth. The problem is that growth requires exploitation of usually laborers. And like you mentioned, the Shirtwaist Triangle Factory fire, child labor. This exploitation has brought some real problems down on people, and there have been some socialist ideas that have helped solve them. So I think that we really need to take that into consideration when we consider capitalism versus socialism.
Socialism is good in theory, but it has been terrible in execution. There hasn't been a socialist, as Alex mentioned, there hasn't been a socialist country that has worked, but as also Alex mentioned, there hasn't been a capitalist country that works. I personally am a capitalist. I believe in the free market, and I believe that there are some limits to the free market, yes, but the drawbacks of the free market far outweigh the drawbacks to a socialist economy.
To their point, you know, a totally capitalist free market, government has no control. You know, obviously, that's opens the doors for a lot of wrongdoing by the select few people who control a lot of things. I think the ideal system, and what we have in America here is a capitalist economy where there is some regulation on these companies, whether it's a 40-hour work week, child labor laws, things like that that protect the workers. But I think overall that the free market should drive the economy. It shouldn't be the government driving the economy through planned economic purposes. So if people want new products or companies want to sell new products to make money, they're going to innovate. Consumers are going to put their values in the companies that are supporting what they stand for. Starbucks is a great example. People go to Starbucks because they like their product. And when there's a challenge, whether it's the straws, things like that, Starbucks will either adapt and have a new product, new cups, and consumers will like that. And if they don't adapt and like that, people will stop, buying Starbucks products. We see, different companies that have poor ethical choices. Consumers shy away from that, and if they don't correct their behavior, they'll eventually fail. So I think with some restrictions from the government to enable, protect the workers, the capitalist economy ultimately, with some restrictions, will be the best scenario for success for a economy.
Yep.
Well, I believe that the free market incentivizes, it incentivizes psychopathy, essentially. Like, companies should act as psychopaths in order to achieve the maximum profits for their investors, which is, I'd argue, the purpose of a company. They need to cut as many things as possible in order to make as much profit as possible. And in doing so, by necessity, have to be as unethical as they can or are allowed to be. And I just don't think that that's right. That's all I got.
All right. Anything else? No? All right, cool. So our next question is, do you think that voting is easily accessible to all Americans? And if not, what should we do about it?
I don't think that it is, and I think it can be more accessible. And here's why. I mean, we've seen across the country, specifically, like I mentioned in the South, we've seen places cut the number of polling places. If you don't know, by the way, the on-campus polling place is right across the hall. No, it's in the space now. It's in the space now. Yes, they moved it. But there's a county in Georgia in 2016 where right before the gubernatorial election, the Secretary of State in one county cut 3 of the remaining 4 polling places. So there was 1 polling place left for the entire county. And if you don't know where your polling place is, then you're kind of screwed because you don't know where to go to vote. It's either that or you vote by absentee ballot or early voting. But early voting, there's even less spaces to go and do that. I think we also need to consider making Election Day a federal holiday. Or if we can't do that, then we have to move it to a weekend at least. Because there are way too many people who can't vote because they have to work. And I think we should maybe even consider giving, if we can't do either of those, then we should give workers time off to go vote. Because it is a very important part of our democracy. It's what drives our democracy and what drives change that we need to see.
There should be more of an incentive to actually get out and vote. A lot of people don't, especially in the 2016 election, especially for the Democratic side, when Hillary Clinton won the ticket, I think a lot of people who wanted to vote for Bernie didn't actually go out and vote at all. And it goes to show because, well, A, they lost, and B, because if you don't incentivize people to get out and vote, they just won't do it in the first place. A lot of people who actually vote, especially in smaller elections, are more dedicated to voting. And you need to make it less of a, I wouldn't say a stigma, but have more reach to actually go out and vote and be willing to vote and actually say that your vote matters instead of the people who vote in one specific area of a larger city
I think voting is fairly accessible, but there is more we can do for it across the country. There definitely are places where polling places are specifically, set up and used to make it difficult for people to vote. But I think, we're seeing a lot of reforms in states that are doing that, and we're on the right track, but it does need to be, have, whether it's more polling locations, better access to polling locations. We saw New York did early voting, and it had very little effect this year. So I don't know if early voting is the right solution to that, or if it just wasn't rolled out the right way. I know Oswego County only had one early voting site, and that was just the other side of the city here. So people would have had to drive sometimes 2 hours to get there, which would they have driven somewhere closer, or would they have driven there? I don't know. But voting is your right, and we should make it as easy as possible for people to do that.
I actually agree with that. I think that there are definitely means that people have used, especially politicians, to hinder people's ability to vote, and I absolutely believe that there are reforms that could be made to do so. Specifically, basically everything you mentioned, getting more polling places, stopping political candidates from shutting down polling locations as well, and there's a bunch of different options. Also, making it a national holiday is a no-brainer.
One more thing I would like to, I forgot to mention automatic voter registration. Make sure that when you turn 18, you're automatically on the voter roll. I think that would be a really great idea to make sure that people are actually already registered to vote before they go to the polls.
No.
Okay, moving on. What immigration reform would you propose, if any? Sure. I don't really know.
I think it's,
Oh yeah, maybe.
If you want to go, you can.
Okay.
No.
Whatever way you guys want to do it.
If you have something you want really, you're dying to know, you're welcome to go.
We'll just start with you then.
All right. Sure. What was the question again?
What immigration reform would you propose?
So yeah, I think that there should be a little bit easier to become a citizen of the United States. So I think that again, there's another misconception about immigration or illegal immigrants. I think that the way the economy currently functions benefits from having illegal immigrants, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but it manages to help them and their families, and then eventually come over here and become legal citizens. But also with expenses, we could not live the way we do without this kind of labor. And building a wall is so goddamn expensive, guys. Come on. And it's also so impractical. 50% of people that come into this country eventually illegally do so through legal means by going into airports because they just come here as guests or they have visas that expire. So there's a bunch of different reasons as to why to not build a wall. But yeah.
I'm just going to take my time to break down the stigma that immigrants have a higher crime rate than native-born citizens. In Texas in 2017, there was a study done, and it showed that the crime rate of all immigrants, both legal and illegal, was, I think, 0.7%. The native-born crime rate was 1.79%. It was significantly high. That's about 2.5 times as much crime from native-born Texans than immigrants. So I think when the argument comes up that illegal immigrants are bringing crime over the border, the crime rate is actually a lot lower for illegal immigrants, immigrants as a whole, and people who come here legally.
100% of illegal immigrants are committing a crime. They're here illegally.
I mean, a crime when they get here. I mean, like you said, most of them are coming here and their visas are expiring and they're coming here as guests. So when they're crossing the border, they're not committing a crime.
I would want to encourage people who want to come to the country to apply for citizenship earlier and make it easier and more accessible to apply for citizenship. Because it is not exactly the easiest process in the world, and when you get here, that would make it easier for them to acclimate and adjust, so they're more likely to become proper citizens and all that good stuff.
I think a comprehensive immigration plan should ideally start with people that are here. You know, the biggest issue is people coming over on, you know, visas or holidays, things like that, and overstaying. And those people could be anywhere in the country, and there's no idea, you know, where they are at this point. And there's no real way to find them and, you know, track them down, things like that. So the first step of a comprehensive immigration plan should be to create a solid, clear, and simple pathway to citizenship for those people that are already here. You know, it's wrong to, and very impractical to take them all and remove them from the country. It shouldn't be an easy process, but it should be a straightforward and simple process that they should be able to accomplish in a relatively short period of time. The second part of a good immigration plan would be to really crack down on people that are overstaying. So implementing a better method of tracking people that are here on visas, and then if they are overstaying, being able to quickly get on that and either remove them or, if we're able, put them on a path to citizenship from there. And then the third does come back to the border. I think we need to have tighter security along the border. A wall is a very costly, ineffective option in most places, but there are a lot of other resources and things we can do to ensure that we do have a secure border and that people are not crossing illegally. You know, we have ports of entry. Come to the ports of entry, and we will, if we're able to, put you on a path to citizenship. But at the same time, we are our own country, and we can't just bring every single person that wants to come here in. It's impractical. So we need to have a clear system to help people that need help when they come here, but also people that are going to come and benefit our country greatly. We would like them as well.
All right, thank you.
Just a quick question for like perspective of somebody in the YF. How do you guys feel about eminent domain and like seizing land to build said wall?
Yeah, it's a bad idea.
Okay, I just wanted to understand how that works.
Yeah, no, all individuals' rights. Government shouldn't be able to take your stuff from you.
That I do agree with that for sure.
I'd also just like to make a quick point about immigration statistics. There were, I think in 2000 the number was 2.1 million people tried to cross the border that were detected. In 2017, that number dropped to 140,000 from 2.1 million. So there's been a drastic decrease in the number of people trying to cross the border.
And to add to the wall, you know, obviously, Young American Freedom had our table last year about the wall. I think many of us, conservatives, Republicans, YIF group members, realize, you know, building the Great Wall of America is not, you know, our best way to tackle our border issues. I think, you know, that the purpose of that table was to create a conversation on immigration and border security, which it did, I guess. You know, a lot of other things too, but that's okay. And I really think that border security is more than just building a wall, and a wall has some benefits in some certain places, but there's better and other options that exist that we could use.
All right, thank you. So what steps do you think that we should take to combat poverty? I think that's you, Alex.
Well, there's a lot to do with poverty specifically. We do have several programs in place already to help, for example, the food stamps program, SNAP. I don't think that SNAP gets enough funding. I'll say that. There, in 2013, when the Republicans tried to defund SNAP, of course, 26 congressmen tried to live on a budget provided by food stamps. I think it's $30 a week for food. And Senator Chris Murphy mentioned that over 4 days he lost 6 pounds. Just put that into perspective. He lost 6 pounds in 4 days on a budget that we're expecting people to buy food on. Obviously, we're not doing enough. if that's the kind of support that we're thinking we can give to people who are already suffering as it is.
I would generally agree with Alex. I tend to believe that people can't, like, the poverty rate in America is fairly high, especially in urbanized cities, and I think the poverty rate in like Los Angeles alone is like a staggering amount, and then it goes on top of the homeless population too. There has to be some form of like programs and assistance that we can give to help reduce the poverty rate. We also need to come up with a greater solution to help get people out of poverty that won't bring more people in.
I think the approach to solving poverty issues, income inequalities, things like that, is offering a hand-up approach, not a hand-out approach. So it's a system based on rewarding individuals or families or however it's structured that are working and obviously providing opportunities to work and better themselves and work up the chain to where they no longer need the assistance. There's some different programs where we see people are rewarded essentially for staying home and not doing much. And I think we need to solve those problems by making it an incentive-based system. Obviously we're not going to give people programs where they can't survive off of them because they don't do anything. We need people to survive and be able to better themselves. But I really think a structured program where you're incentivized to do better, to learn more, to better yourself, work your way up to better jobs or whatever it might be, is a program that would essentially lift people out of those situations so they are able to be off those assistance programs, work for themselves, and greater benefit themselves and our society as a whole.
You guys know the death tax? No, it's the estate tax is what it's actually called. So one of the Koch brothers died, and the amount that would have been taken in by the estate tax would have solved homelessness in America. That could have just gone to that and solving that problem entirely. So basically, I believe that certain people, specifically billionaires, have way more money than they know what to do with. And I think that some sort of bracketed tax system would be able to help redistribute some of that insane wealth that they have no idea what to do with back to the people and actually make it livable, or make livable conditions for people. I feel like that's also kind of a no-brainer, but that's just me.
I'd just like to make a point to what Tyler said. I understand the hand-up approach, but sometimes because of other restrictions like amount of hours working, it's hard to kind of work up to better jobs when you are just trying to make payments on your apartment, utilities and other stuff. If you have a child, it's even harder, and then you have to get an education to get better jobs. You don't have the time to do that, or if you do have the time, you will be physically exhausted. And so these programs, they do help. They really do help in the short run and the long run, making sure that people do have enough to eat even. And even if they have enough to eat, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good food. Just because you are eating does not mean that you are food secure. There's a difference between hunger and food insecurity. Food insecurity is when you're not having proper nutrition, malnutrition basically. When you're malnourished, you're not getting, if you're a kid, you're not getting good grades in school. And so this cycle of poverty just keeps snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. And we have to address it now. We have to make sure that people are getting the proper education, the proper nutrients they need. They need to help these people as much as we can.
Before I let it go to you, would any of you guys like to respond?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference first from Matt's point, his ideology is he wants to punish people for being successful. The more successful you are, the more we're going to take from you, and I think that's wrong. If I study really hard for a test and I get an A, and someone doesn't study at all and gets a D, should I get a B and they get a C? I think that's wrong. And then to your point, I think a program that would incentivize you to work your way up and a hand up doesn't always just mean strictly working jobs. It could have educational parts. You have to go, to different classes, different schools, and better yourself that way, and you would be rewarded for that as well. So I think it's a total transition from the current state we're in, and just the way we are. But it would be a comprehensive if you are taking these certain steps, whether they're specifically outlined or in a broad category of working your way up, you would be rewarded for that as you go up, and eventually up and off of the programs.
All right, so I do have a couple of problems with this. First, a lot of people that are insanely wealthy usually don't pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. They are usually given a lot of wealth to start off with and then can make more. This is because, again, the system incentivizes this current ability to do this. But also, this is one of the few topics I'm willing to make America great again on, because in the 50s, percentage-wise, the richest 1% were taxed, I think, 30% more than they currently are. And the current tax system is only going to be 3% of the growth that they're going to be expected to have, the billionaires. So this is a very marginal thing for them, and the amount of money is literally inconceivable for people. Can you imagine, let's say, how much space would $1 billion in singles take up? Because I can't, because that's insane.
All right. Do you guys want to reply one more time and then we'll move on, or?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Before you ask the next question, I'm going to say, just so we have enough time for audience questions, we have 2 more questions left, but I'm going to limit the responses to 1 minute times, just so we have enough time for them.
All right, so considering political polarization has become a much more relevant topic in recent years, how do you think we can take steps to reconcile this polarization between parties?
I think that in order to decrease the polarization, I think that we all need to take a more independent approach. We need to have rational discussions about what we disagree with on both sides, because a lot of people now just want to have talking heads say how they feel and exactly what they want to hear, but nobody actually wants to be challenged politically. I think we need to have the ability to rationally challenge those that we disagree with and do it in a positive manner. And even if it gets in a more negative manner, just agree to disagree in a sense and then just part ways.
All right, thank you.
I'll start by saying I think the current president is not a good ambassador for solving the polarization issues. I support him on a lot of things, but he's really not doing a good job at bridging that gap at all. And as someone who has received plenty of threats for political things, I've had my family receive threats for things I do and things like that, and it's scary to see that. They've done nothing, and people are threatening them because of what I've done. So I think we need to come together from both sides. Conservatives are just as bad sometimes as liberals or left is, and it really starts by just having conversations like this. We've said some things each other disagrees with, I'm sure, but we're sitting here talking about it, and that's great. I think we need to be able to do more of that. I think people need to really embrace, if they want to, embrace politics more. It used to be one of those things that you don't really talk about, and we need to be able to talk about that in a civil way.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think there are 2 fronts to this one. One, I think, again, it's on the companies, not the people. So specifically, I'm talking about social media, just because it is so pervasive. It is the #1 news source for most people around the world, is Facebook, actually. And a lot of it is inaccurate or intentionally misleading. And I think that it needs to have some sort of moderation. And the other thing is biased media. That was a law that was repealed during the Bush administration, where you could not have biased media. And I think that we need to reestablish not having biased media in order to kind of bring people back together again. Who was it? It was like the Fox executive at the time that was responsible for that bill being passed. But yeah, I think those are the two major points that are actually dividing people. I don't think that people are actually that divided. I just think that they're told that they're divided and eventually start to believe it.
I think Tyler was right. Discussions like this are a perfect way to constructively talk about your ideas, someone else's ideas, and how they're similar, how they're different. Yeah, you're not going to agree with everyone on everything. There's probably something that I disagree with everyone up here. But we're sitting down and we're having this discussion in a respectful way. We're listening to one another. We're responding when we think it's necessary, and we're making sure that we're not doing ad hominem attacks. We're not going after one another. That's something that's really important, that you're focusing on the issues, not on the person.
All right, thank you. So we have one more actual question, then we'll do like a quick lightning round sort of thing. Do you think that our criminal justice system is broken? And if you do, how do you propose we fix it? I know that's a lot to pack into a minute, but do the best you can.
I have a lot to say about this one. Really quick. New York State just passed absolutely atrocious criminal justice reform laws this year. Essentially, I can assault somebody, I can stand here, beat Wyatt up till he's bloody and go to the hospital, and then the police will come, and starting January 1st, they will say, okay, here's your ticket, please come to court in 2 weeks. And then Wyatt gets out of the hospital, I can come back and beat him again. And the police do the exact same thing. Give me a ticket, say please come to court in 2 weeks. It's absolutely atrocious, it's ridiculous. There's only a select few crimes starting in January that people will be actually arrested and brought to jail for until their trial. You could rape somebody and be given a ticket, please come back to jail, or please come to court in 2 weeks, and you won't go to jail until your trial. And I think that it's very dangerous to victims. I think it's dangerous to society as a whole. And I think we need to quickly address this before it goes into effect January 1st.
All right, thank you.
All right, so police brutality is a big problem. It is like a systemic issue causing, starting from the origins of the police, which are also kind of messed up if you look back into them. What else? So for-profit prisons, ridiculous. Those things should be gone immediately. There are places in the United States where you can keep political prisoners, and we don't really talk about it that much. That needs to go away too. What else for comprehensive reform? This is a hard, this is a lot of stuff in this question. Yes, it is absolutely broken. The criminal justice system, there's not enough public defenders is another big issue, and I think public defenders are heroes and should get their own holiday. There's so many small little reforms that can also be made, but I think those are the main big ones that I have right now.
All right, thank you.
I want to thank you for covering for private prisons, public defenders, because I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about cash bail. Cash bail, currently out of the, I think, 2.3 million people who are sitting in jail right now in America, we have the largest prison population in the world, by the way. Cash bail makes up, people who can't pay bail makes up 540,000 of those 2.3 million people who couldn't pay for jail. You talked about where's innocent until proven guilty earlier. This is where that comes in. People are innocent until proven guilty, but they're sitting in jail while they're waiting trial because they can't pay for bail.
The federal government makes way too much money on bogus charges for some people, especially like marijuana charges. A lot of people get just thrown into jail for that, and it's like they have more than an eighth. I mean, they just get basically the book thrown at them, and they have to stay in jail, as Alex pointed out, for many years on charges that they can't necessarily afford. So I think there has to be a overarching theme of better prison reform, and we have to come together to make that happen.
Oh wait, yeah. I really want to change the model. I want to focus on the Swedish model, where they actually treat people in prison like people instead of animals and not humans. So that's a really big one. I had one more that was a really good one though, and I can't. Oh yeah, the war on drugs. Decriminalize all drugs, and then have facilities open for people to use those drugs, but they would work as rehab facilities as well, which is a model that is used in Portugal, which is way more successful than what we currently have. Anyone else?
Look up the new New York State law changes. They're very scary.
It sounds scary.
All right, so thank you all for going so quick. You can ask our last lightning round question.
That was one of the biggest questions.
You really packed that one in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so for our last question, don't feel pressured to answer this if you don't have an answer. But what candidate or candidates are you looking at in the 2020 election? Who'd you like to hear more from, or who'd you like to see nominated?
Me now?
Yeah, sure.
Alright, yeah, I'm probably gonna vote for Bernie. I think he's an interesting character, and I think he supports a lot of the ideals that I also do.
There's a lot of good candidates out there. Whoever the Democratic nominee is, I'm probably going to vote for them over Trump.
Yeah.
Not probably. I'm definitely going to vote for them over Trump. Right now, who really interests me, probably Kamala Harris and Julian Castro.
I will be voting for Donald J. Trump in the next election, but I actually do like some of the things that Tulsi Gabbard has to say. I really think that I really think that it's a shame that she's being basically censored by the Democratic Party, because she has a lot of good points that she can bring up, and she's not getting the right platform or the ability to say those things. But of the majority of candidates running, I have a lot of, I wouldn't say respect, but I have a lot of interest in Tulsi and the Donald.
I like Tulsi as well. I think she's really dynamic. I disagree on a lot of her positions, but I think she's a great candidate for the Democrats. I also like Andrew Yang. He's really bringing a lot of change to kind of politics, and I think he's doing a good job at that. But when it comes down to it, I would like to see the president reelected, and I think that's the best option for our nation moving forward.
Andrew Yang's from Schenectady, actually.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Anyone from Schenectady?
Yeah.
Andrew Yang's from Schenectady.
Andrew Yang's a Hudson Valley guy.
Oh, yeah.
All
right,
so
thank you,
now
guys.
we're going to open it up to the audience. I'm going to see if this works this time so you can hear them. Hopefully it does.
Does it?
It does.
Oh, it does.
Oh, okay.
Hello?
Yeah, make me quiet.
Yeah, you may need to speak up.
Hello?
Yeah.
Maybe you just have to put it really close to your mouth.
Quality's not good,
Kinda.
but I mean, it doesn't need to be, so.
Okay, so if like stand up or raise your hand or something.
Yep.
She has a question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, it's okay. I can talk loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go. Thank you guys for coming out. I really appreciate it. So I know we talked a little bit about things getting partisan in American politics, which is like a big issue. So I feel like one issue that's kind of got caught in a trap about that is climate change. So if the issue has been like born out of science and proven significantly, like I heard you guys talk about, the world isn't going to end in 12 years, but we have a finite amount of time in 12 years where we have irreversible change. So if this is a nonpartisan issue because it's backed by climate change, by science, why has a certain party, why has certain members in politics made this an issue, and what do you guys think can be done to solve this?
We can just go down the line for this one.
The reason why some people are against this is money. They get a lot of money and incentives from companies, especially ones that pollute a lot, to not make laws or regulations against them. That's unfortunately the truth, and I'm going to try to stop that from happening.
Money in politics, obviously, that's a big reason. Our first Secretary of State under Donald Trump, Rex Tillerson, actually got a huge bonus from ExxonMobil for going into government service, because ExxonMobil gives executives bonuses if they get a job with the government, because they know that when their employees get jobs with the government, they're going to make rules that benefit ExxonMobil and not the rest of us.
Yeah, I generally agree with the two of them. Money in politics is a real issue, and I think that more like, as Alex brought up, that more like, especially like people who pollute get onto the boards of in the federal government. But honestly, yeah, I don't really know what to say to this, but I'll just.
I think they all kind of said it with money.
Oh, yeah, let the free market decide.
But no, I think the free market will. We saw with our climate protests a month or two ago now that how many people were out and advocating for what they want. You know, they were heard. And, you know, it's not a one-time, we advocate for it and then the government changes. But over time, what the consumers or the citizens, or however you want to look at people, want is what will have to be enacted and adopted. And if there's politicians that aren't doing that, you vote them out. If your companies aren't doing that, you stop buying their products. And it kind of works that way.
All right.
Is the microphone working, Kenny?
Oh, let's see. Yeah, a little bit. I think it's kind
No,
of.
that's just.
No, that's just you. Wait, all right, so just speak loud.
Yeah. All right, Seth.
So a lot of people are against regulating individual firearm classifications, the AR-15s, assault rifles, that sort of thing. But we've seen success within the Lautenberg Amendment, preventing domestic abusers, preventing felons from being able to get firearms. Do you think maybe taking that into a more broader approach? As a vet, I know how to use an assault rifle. I've been trained by drill sergeants. Do you think basically people should be trained before they can even purchase? Basically a background check at a training facility, and they go through the classification. Maybe you get classified for pistol, you get classified for assault, shotgun, so on and so forth.
We'll start at the other end of the table.
Yes and no. I don't think you should be required to go through certain things, but I think you should be incentivized and encouraged to. Ideally, I'd like to see everyone that owns firearms be properly trained and know how to use them. But at the same time, I don't think they should be required to. And I think, you know, banning certain specific types of weapons is wrong. And oftentimes it's done as a knee-jerk reaction and has really little difference. You know, we talked in past, you know, school shooting incidents about banning assault rifles. You know, the one that just happened last week was done with a handgun. So, you know, you want to ban an assault rifle that wouldn't have stopped, you know, another one. So it's an issue that I think banning them will have very little effect on things overall.
First off, I want to say thank you for your service, by the way. Thank you. We should all come together and thank our vets. But I believe at least one person in a household should be trained to know how to use a firearm. And to your point about the tiers, I believe that there not necessarily should be like a tier ranking, but if you want to have an assault rifle, I believe you should go through not necessarily more like rigorous process, but people who will want to own an assault rifle will more likely be more serious about owning it and will want to take the proper steps to make sure that they know how to use it and everything else. Because I have actually built an AR-15, so I know how to properly use it, how it works, and I go shooting every week to make sure that I know how to properly use firearms, and I practice every implement of gun safety. All my ammo is kept from the guns in a separate room and is locked, so it's and my safe is away from everything else. So if people know how to properly use and implement gun safety, they'll be less likely to conduct more violent crimes.
I support, like I said, I support an assault weapons ban. That's where I stand on that. I think that's a very interesting idea with the tiers. Yeah, I would have to look into that more, but I'm intrigued. I like that idea.
No, I like the idea of more regulation and the tier system specifically. It seems to make a lot of sense to me that people should be trained how to use their guns, have the background checks during the training, but in order to get the stuff done. I think it'd be a lot safer for everybody in general. But
All right. Any other questions?
Okay, is this? Oh, okay, that's definitely working. Finally, we got a working system.
This is actually a question for the Democrat and the Socialist on the panel, but if the Conservatives have anything to say about it, they can answer. Do you worry that focusing on Trump's impeachment could have any unintended political consequences? So in other words, do you worry that aiming for Trump's impeachment could hurt the Democrats' chances of getting elected in the near future?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So when people's beliefs are challenged to their core, there's an effect called the backfire effect, where regardless of all logic and reason, people like dig deep and say like, I believe this and feel that way. So I am a little worried that people are going to get even more radicalized towards Donald Trump. So that is a little concerning to me, but I hope that the impeachment proceedings go through and that he's found guilty and maybe goes to jail or something. We'll see. But yeah, I'm a little worried.
I'm trying to keep that in mind when I'm thinking about the impeachment inquiry. We saw in '96 after the Clinton impeachment hearings, we saw the backlash from that. I mean, the Republicans already had the House and the Senate, but I think in 2000 the Democrats brought it back to even. The Republicans had the Senate and we brought it back to even because of the backlash from the Clinton impeachment. I wouldn't use the word worried though, because I think it's the right thing to do. So I'm not really worried about the political, the electoral consequences of it, just because I think it's the right thing to do.
I'm going to go quickly on it. I think it should be worrisome for Democrats. Every day they spend talking on impeachment is another day less that their party leaders and leading candidates could be speaking about their message to voters. Every day, this election cycle started long ago and it's got a long way to go still. And every day is another opportunity to try and reach voters with whether it's the Democratic Party just kind of pushing their progressive message in general, or specific candidates pushing their personal messages. And I think Nancy Pelosi was kind of hesitant to start this whole impeachment because she knew that. She's a smart politician. She wouldn't be where she is if she wasn't a smart politician. And I think she knew that starting these would kind of take over for a while, and it would, I think, hurt Democrats in this upcoming election overall.
Yeah, just something real quick. So yeah, I think that like what you were saying earlier is something that's worrying, that you see and hear his name all the time, and just through the sheer like visual and like getting used to hearing it all the time makes you be like, oh wait, I remember that guy. Especially for people on the fence or don't know anything about politics, they recognize a name and then they're just going to vote for it. He had, I think, during the last election or his election, what was it, like 60% of the overall screen time or something like that, which is insane. That is such good advertising, despite how ridiculous he was. But like, that's all that matters, is just getting your face out there. And the more time we spend on this, I understand that it is necessary, and I absolutely do believe in the due process of law, and I hope that we do go through with this. But it does definitely concern me a little bit.
All right, anyone else?
I'm curious on what your stances are in the Middle East, more specifically like issues with Iran and Turkey and pulling American troops out of Syria.
Sure. I'll start, I guess. I am in no way totally versed, and I don't think anybody aside from top military personnel that has all the information can be completely versed in it. I am a strong proponent of bringing our troops home. I don't like to see any Americans involved in wars where they're costing their lives. But, I realize it's not as easy as just pulling our people out and saying, we're done, good luck on your own. So I do think we should focus on a strategy where we can work to quickly get our people out of there. But, it's a very toxic area of the world that's been at war with each other for years. And, for almost as long as they've been around, they've been warring with each other. So I don't know that American involvement in that should be a thing, and I think we need to find a way to get ourselves out of it.
There have been people born after September 11th, 2001 that are now fighting the war on terror that has been going on for about 20 years. So I think that is absolutely insane. We should start gradually pulling our troops out of parts of the Middle East that are the most toxic. As Tyler mentioned, you can't exactly pull everybody out at once and say, all right, well, here, go suit yourselves. It's essentially the fact that you have to, if you gradually do it over time, you can see what your effect will have, and ultimately, you can take everybody out in due time.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's really opposed to bringing troops home. What I think the bigger problem was how we just kind of up and left, and now the Kurds, our allies, were kind of abandoned and screwed. I mean, Turkey, we were 100%.
Absolutely.
Turkey came in and they're not in a good place right now, the Kurds. And I'm very concerned as to what that shows our other allies as to how we'll treat them in the foreign stage.
Yeah, again, I am by no means an expert here, but I think abandoning the Kurds is a really, really bad move. And also, we historically have had the worst exit strategies of possibly any military power ever. Hilariously bad. I think, what was it? There was a Tom Hanks movie where he played a guy who funded one of the Afghanistan war, like helped one of the senators that helped fund the Afghanistan war. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, all right. It's called. Yeah, regardless. He funded this war essentially through saying oh man, we really got to help these people, we got to stop the Russians, whatever. And then over a period of time, we started winning. We were using less money to take down their more expensive things, and we were draining the funds from Russia, which was the point for most people. But he was like, all right, guys, war is over. We just need to establish some sort of infrastructure to help these people get along. And then he got no money. People laughed in his face. And I think that this is a big problem that America has, where we get into things and then we want to get out of them pretty quickly. I think that having a large military presence there is obviously not ideal. Nobody wants to be at war, really, unless you're a war privateer. The majority of people don't actually want to be at war, but to abandon the Kurds in the way that we have, and to see the way that they're currently persecuted, especially by Turkey, after all the help that we've been on the ground with them for years, and now we're just leaving. Oh my God, it's kind of unconscionable. I can't support it.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
What impact do you think Trump appointing 2 conservative judges is going to have on Roe v. Wade in the near future? And if so, how is that going to change abortion rights across the country?
1 second. Okay. Not to stop this, but please keep your answers brief, because I do realize that we have an all-male panel right here, and I don't want you guys to be talking about abortion for a long time, because no offense, but you're all men, so.
Yeah, I agree. We're all men, so we shouldn't talk about killing people. Got it.
That's not what I said. So.
I see it as a two-facet. Appointing conservative judges to the Supreme Court, in a lot of ways, I strongly support. However, I really don't see it having any, quick effects on Roe v. Wade. I don't see it being overturned. I don't see any cases coming into it really having any detrimental effects on the way things are now. And whether that's good or bad or indifferent is for everyone's opinions to be. But I don't see this current Supreme Court really overturning it or making any decisions that are really detrimental to it.
I generally agree with Tyler. That's all I have to say.
I'm wary because of what Vice President Mike Pence said a while back. I think he said something like, if the conservatives got the Supreme Court, they were going to send Roe v. Wade, quote, to the ash heap of history. Yeah. So that has me at least a little bit concerned, for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely a little worried. Just like the Conservative Party being the party that generally tries to defund and like essentially demonize Planned Parenthood and other programs like that. I'm definitely worried for Roe v. Wade, but I really hope for the best. But again, I'm not an expert on this subject.
All right. Another question?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I'll make my way over there when
I can shout, it's fine. So just kind of, panel's called Yes, We Can All Get Along. I just wanted, so for a lot of people, politics is kind of personal. Like for women in this country, we do have a president who has, has sexually assaulted people. People of color in this country, the LGBTQ community in this country. It's not a safe place for a lot of people right now. And it hasn't always been. America has a long history of, treating people who aren't white, straight, and male very well. So, like, how would you guys, as allies, as men, as, I don't want to assume people's sexuality or, gender and stuff, but assuming if you're a straight man, if you're not, great. But, like, as allies, how do we kind of move the country along to be a safer place for, like I said, women, people of color, LGBTQ people? I don't know if that makes sense.
Like how to be allies. I mean, I'd say like advocate for policies. Just have marches for specific policies that you guys are, like that anybody is interested in for defending the freedoms and rights of people. I think that's like a big way to do it, or like trying to actually implement these. Like again, I want to allow anybody in any community, whatever, to be able to buy housing or to be able to have the rights of everybody else in the community.
As a straight white male, I cannot speak to the experiences of the LGBTQ community. I cannot speak to the experiences of women, to people of color. Eric Swalwell, during his presidential campaign, had a very good policy called Pass the Mic, where straight white males let people of color talk, they let women talk, they let people from the LGBTQ community talk. We need to hear those voices a lot more than we're currently hearing. This panel is not a very good representation of what the world actually is. So we definitely need to hear more of those voices.
I generally agree with Alex on this one. I personally I believe that everybody should have a voice, and if they have any issues, you should just blatantly go out and say it. I mean, if you have any problems with especially with legislation, if you have a problem with somebody, don't elect them again. Just go right out and vote. If you vote for who you believe in, you can, I wouldn't say exactly change anything, but if you make a little impacts here and there, you can eventually spark change.
I think to get to the heart of the question is overcoming challenges to speak about political issues or issues that are challenging to speak about is just really starting to have those conversations slowly. Whether it's something that you come to an event like this and then you go back to your dorm later or your house later and have a conversation about something we talked about or something like that. It's just slowly getting yourself out and into those conversations and developing your voice on that and then becoming an advocate for things you support. And it's not an easy process for some people, but I think the best way to do that is to just slowly get yourself involved and become an advocate for things you really care for.
All right, we have enough time for 2 or 3 more questions. I guess people on this side.
Yeah, he's gonna go back there and then in the white center and then we'll go back.
So you mentioned that new law in New York State that had to do with criminal justice reform, and that did sound really scary. So I googled it, and on the New York State website it says that law only applies for Class E felonies, which is the lowest level of felonies, and misdemeanors. And then if you further research it, you see that there are 9 exceptions to that law that you can still arrest people for. And those include violent offenses, sex offenses, and offenses against children.
Sure.
So I currently work in the Onondaga County District Attorney's Office. We prosecute and handle all the cases in Onondaga County. I also intern in the Sheriff's Office in Oswego here, who works closely with the District Attorney's Office in Oswego. And I've been in on a lot of the meetings, conversations about how this law will, affect our communities. And while the law may provide these exceptions, the practicality of it, and along with several other reforms, including discovery reform, things like that, are going to make it very impractical for these people to actually be arrested and not given that appearance ticket. So I think what we're going to see come January is these people being given appearance tickets and let that go on the street. And you can look. There's several. The State District Attorney Association has put out several statements and papers on it. Several sheriff's offices, local leaders have been strongly against these reforms and laws for the same reasons. And there's going to be a press conference Thursday in Syracuse with the sheriff from Oswego, the district attorney from Oswego, and several other surrounding communities. Their law enforcement and prosecutors are going to be there stating what this law will affect in their specific communities and how they are going to be handling it and the struggles they're going to face. So I think it's really going to be a dangerous thing for our community.
Can I just ask a quick question? You mentioned it's going to be more impractical. What's going to make it more impractical?
Currently, so the impractical first is the discovery reform. So if you are arrested and go to trial, you and your defense attorney are allowed to receive copies of essentially everything from your incident. And right now, there's no specific time limit on that as long as it's before trial. The new law, will impose a 14-day or 15-day time limit on that. So every single radio, if I'm a police officer and I radio to the 911 center who dispatched me to your call, that will need to be recorded, reviewed by the prosecutor's office, and then sent to you. And when you're handling a lot of cases, doing every single transmission, every single file of paperwork, every single, if you rob a grocery store and then drive down the street, we need to get every single video camera from all the stores surrounding that, every single thing. And it'll be impractical to get that over within 14 days just because of the sheer volume of it. And so we're not against, or I'm personally not against giving you access to see all of that. I just think imposing these strict timelines where your trial might not happen for a year anyways, but now I have to have my stuff to you in 14 days instead of just ahead of the trial, I think is impractical.
All right. Our next question. Oh.
So you've all been very in favor of getting out there and going to vote. What are your thoughts on the Electoral College?
I have a really good analogy.
Okay,
So,
for time's sake.
be quick.
I want to get to one. Yeah, be quick.
There is 2 wolves and a sheep, and they take a majority vote on what they eat for dinner that night. That's not going to go well for the sheep. So I think an electoral college is something that we need. Obviously, population densities in big cities tend to lean Democrat or liberal, and they don't have the same needs as rural communities do, and they tend to lean conservative Republican. And it doesn't matter what the parties are, just the needs of big cities and the needs of rural communities are not the same. So treating them, where you could go campaign in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, Houston, you could only campaign in those cities, you could cater to all those needs, and you would win, and then you would leave the rest of the country up hanging, because why would you care what they think? You don't need them to get elected. And politicians ultimately want to get reelected, whether we like that or not.
I generally agree with that. I think the Electoral College is necessary because someone who lives out in, I'd probably say Oklahoma City, for example, won't exactly have the same needs as somebody who lives in Manhattan. Or somebody who lives in upstate New York won't exactly have the same needs as somebody who lives in the 5 boroughs, or one of the 5 boroughs. I live on a farm, so I wouldn't exactly need the same legislation as somebody who lives in a condo. And I believe that even though, like, because as Tyler mentioned, the population centers would control basically the election. And that was the whole point of the electoral college, so that way everybody has a generally equal say.
We've got 2 minutes, so.
I just want to make a quick point. Anyone else think it's a little weird that the popular vote winner has won the presidential, or the popular vote winner has won the presidential election, or has lost the presidential election twice this century?
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
It's a little bit weird. I think that while that is a valid point, we're already concentrating our presidential candidate visits to only a set specific number of states. They're not going to go to Oklahoma because Oklahoma's going to go to the Republicans anyway. So that person in Oklahoma City, their news are still going to be ignored. If you go into, they're really only going to focus on Ohio, Pennsylvania, maybe Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, just like those swing states. That's going to be it. Just those handful of states.
Until Max is dying to say something.
Yeah, all right. Super quick. The fact that a person, some randomly chosen person, can decide whether or not they want to listen to the majority of the people in their state's votes is insane. Are you kidding me? Oh my god. Like, one person can decide whether or not to be like, yeah, I'll vote for the way that people want, or nah, I don't feel like it. This will benefit me the most. That is crazy. All right, that's it. I'm done.
All right, last question.
I should be good from the mic. So I just have a question regarding mental health and like on campus. So I know that they've kind of limited in the sense, especially like this semester, because they switched the policies. Someone from Oneida can't get into Waterbury, like with their ID. So because they switched that, they moved the place where like the open talk was, where you couldn't meet with a counselor, to like a more central place where I understand. But I used to live in Waterbury, where he was down the hall from me. So if I needed to talk to someone, he was right there accessible to me. But now it's not as accessible. So I was wondering, at least with mental health and on our campus, do you think they should make it more accessible for you to talk to someone and or permit something, let's say like a mental health day, which is gaining traction, I know, because some people think that like they could use that like to benefit themselves.
I agree that there should be way more. I also don't necessarily agree in the security measures of locking people out of dorms during daylight hours, especially for specific cases like this or like going to a function or something like that. I think that should be fine as long as it's during daylight hours. And like even then, it depends. But like I definitely think that people need to have access to like mental health care, and the Let's Talk is a great way to do that. But unfortunately, like I've gone to different buildings to go to it, but now that you can't do it, that's ridiculous. I think people should have as much, like the most ability to go get their needs met as possible.
I think that's a really great point to make that I don't think a lot of people thought of when these changes were made. It really should be so that if you need to talk to someone, you can talk to someone. And the counseling center is overbooked. There's a gigantic waiting list. So if someone has something that they need to talk about, and they don't have that access to Let's Talk now. And that definitely needs to be changed so that they have that access.
I generally agree. We should be making Let's Talk more accessible. That's all I have to say about that, really.
Yeah, I don't live on campus anymore, so I don't know. I mean, I know the buildings are locked, things like that. So I guess I didn't know that was an issue with not being able to access that resource. I think that is an issue that should be looked at. Whether it's putting more of those in different buildings or rotating them better, so people that are in those buildings can have better access to them. Whether it's putting a centralized location in, but there should be resources available to students that want to take advantage of them, and they should be able to take advantage of the resources that we do have.
All right, thank you all, and thank you guys all for coming. This was a really good time to get different opinions heard.
So I'm not sure if there's another event going on in this room after we leave or not, but we're here for probably a couple more minutes, but I'm going to try and get us out of here as quick as possible. But if you have any questions for me or for Harrison or for any of the panelists, feel free to come and talk to us.
Can I just real quick plug my tomorrow?
Oh, sure.
Tomorrow night, in this exact same room, we will have Dana Walter, Francis Knoll, and Roger Misso, the 3 Democrats running for Congress in this district, here at 6:30. So if you want to go to that, make sure to come. It will be a forum, so you can ask candidates your questions. We did invite John Catco, but he will not be coming. So that is unfortunate, but that's all.
I would also like to point out that the political science department is running a food drive right now, so if you'd like to donate, and I highly encourage everyone to, you can drop off cans and boxes of food in Mahar 435 and I believe 446. That's it.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.